Welcome to PixelTunes Radio, a podcast where we have fun talking about video games and video game music. I am Mike.
And I'm Ed.
And this is our Nintendo 64 episode.
Episode 35.
Yes.
Middle age.
Yes.
Sad.
A little
and
bit.
good at the same time.
Well, you're 35.
I'm 36.
Oh, yeah, you are 36.
Shut
That's
up.
right. Man.
I don't want to talk about it. I'm still older than our podcasts. That's not going to be for long, though.
Wait, that means you're going to be 37 this year?
Shut up.
So, we're going to start things off with Clarification Corner. That's right. That's when Mike or Ed screws up on the previous episode and needs to correct himself, one or the other. So, this was my screw up. Armorines Project Swarm, which we talked about last episode.
Very briefly,
is actually not a Nintendo 64 exclusive. It actually came out on the PlayStation. So both the PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64 got that terrible game.
Yes.
Yes.
That's all we needed to clarify.
That is.
Okay.
All right then.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
So the Nintendo 64 holds a special place in my heart. I know Ed's not so much.
You know, it's funny, and everything that I talk about ends up going back to my brother and I, and how we're so opposite with our game tastes and such. And the N64 was like my brother's system, so he would mainly play like GoldenEye and all of those games, and I would be mainly the PlayStation guy, so I would play like Driver and games that were more for like suited my taste were on the PlayStation, so yeah. I just pretty much stuck with that system.
I had both too, so.
But you know, we didn't have a lot of experience with the N64 because my brother and I shared the bedroom, so I would be in there watching him play games and stuff, and so you know, I got familiar with a lot of the games for it, and I did play some games myself too. So, and we'll talk about the games that I enjoyed as we go through. So it was good. You know, we got it on not launch day. Well, I picked it up on launch day. Mm-hmm. I've talked about this before. I used to work at Toys R Us and was able to get a system, and then we just held on to it, and then it was a surprise for my brother at Christmas. So but it was only like a 2-month period or something like that. September 29th, 1996 was the release date for the US.
Right.
So, wow, it was like 3 months that I had to hold on to it before giving it to my brother. It was crazy.
Almost 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, we're old.
It's crazy, man.
Seriously. I was in high school when I got an N64. So this was actually several years after the N64 came out. I got it when Zelda 64 came out. And it was a Hanukkah gift to me from my parents. And I still have I don't have a lot, like I have a lot of my original N64 stuff, like a lot of it I sold, but I still have my Atomic Green controller and still plays great to this day. The analog stick is definitely worn out, like worn in, but not worn out. That's so awesome. You could still play games on it. It doesn't wiggle when you move it back and forth. Like it's still in really amazing shape. I don't know why that specific controller stayed in such good shape, but I really like the N64. I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, I was still at that awkward age where I would still play like the Banjo Kazooies and the Mario 64s and like those type of platformers, and I would get all excited about those games. But then I would play games like Perfect Dark and I had a PlayStation too, so I would play the more mature stuff on PlayStation, and mostly on N64 I stuck with the kiddie games or the more like platformer based games, Castlevania, that type of stuff. So I kind of bounced back and forth. I loved both equally. Yeah,
I think a major detractor for the N64 for my family too is that the cartridges were so much more expensive than a lot of the PlayStation games.
That is true.
We're talking like 60, sometimes $70 for the higher profile rare titles. You could pick up some PlayStation games that were as cheap as $30 for like the lower budget titles. Yeah. So it was kind of a big price disparity there.
Yeah, no, PlayStation 1 games were definitely cheaper and they were on disc, so it made more sense in most cases for developers to kind of shift development over to either the Sega Saturn, which that in itself was expensive just because development was so ridiculous for that system.
Yeah.
Unless you were making a 2D game, basically.
The N64 just came at everything from like a totally opposite direction. Less polygons but more filtering. You always hear about sound chips, right? So there's the SPC 700 in the Super Nintendo. There's the 2612 in the Genesis. Right. There's all these FM chips in all these different systems. The N64 doesn't have a sound chip. It doesn't have a dedicated sound chip, which is totally weird. So the better or not necessarily better depending on the person behind it, but the more technologically advanced your music was, the more processing power it ate up from the games. So like on the Super Nintendo, you can have an amazing soundtrack from Yuzo Koshiro with all these high quality samples, and it wouldn't affect your game at all. But if you wanted to do like live music or, a very rich sounding soundtrack in your game, your processing power was going to suffer on the N64.
Right.
So that's why, and we'll kind of like delve into these games a little bit as we go through the podcast, but a lot of these soundtracks that are really like almost live music sounding were very, very simple kinds of games.
Yeah.
And a lot of the really, really big games had excellent composers behind them, but you'll find that the sounds are a little more simple. It sounds more like a Super Nintendo or something like that.
Right.
Whereas, the next gen sounding soundtracks were generally paired with, like Neil Voss, for instance, who created amazing N64 soundtracks. We played them in the past, but those were paired with very simple games like Tetris and Tetris.
Right.
So, kind of an interesting mix where you have better sound and worse games. It almost sounds backwards, but it's just very unique to the N64. So speaking of excellently composed music that's also very simple, our first game tonight is going to be Banjo Kazooie. Oh, sorry, Banjo Kazooie. It's American.
Banjo Kazooie. Oh, God. Yes, Grant Kirkhope composed this soundtrack, and of course we can't go without talking about the new game that he is going to be composing music for, which is the spiritual successor to the Banjo Kazooie series, which is called Ukulele. Recently hit funding, and
it hit not funding only like a minute it came out.
Like it came out, and 5 minutes later it was like funded.
Yep.
Oh, and let's go for all the stretch goals.
It's crazy.
So I am super psyched about this game. It's going to be great. I can't wait to play it. But what I'm actually really excited about is hearing more music from Grant Kirkhope, and also David Wise is joining up in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be neat too. I'm glad that Dave Wise is coming back into the scene.
The track that they put up on the Ukulele Kickstarter, Grant Kirkhope's track is like straight up Banjo Kazooie. Like when you hear, we're going to play Mumbo's Mountain in a minute, and when you hear Mumbo's Mountain, you're going to be like, oh, now go and listen to the Kickstarter music for Ukulele, and it's like straight up Banjo Kazooie, which makes sense because he composed for Banjo Kazooie. So, but when you listen to David Wise's track, it's like something right out of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. But anyways, so Banjo Kazooie was a game that came out in 1998. It was one of the first Rare titles that came out for the N64. They were working pretty hard on it for quite some time. And it was an original title that was made by Rare, and it was specifically designed for the N64, really with a huge focus on creating a Mario 64-ish type game.
Yeah, and I think
they did pretty good job.
It also kind of kicked off that kind of concept where you're in a 3D platforming world and you have a partner, like a helper character.
Yeah.
Because after Banjo-Kazooie, you got Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank and all these kind of platformers where your character kind of they had somebody to interact with as they went through the stages without needing to get other characters in to talk to you. So it was kind of neat.
And there was very much a pairing between the two, where the two would joke around with each other, and even though they weren't talking in actual human voices or anything like that, everything was sounds like whoa, wow.
Speaking of which, that's one of my pet peeves about Rare games.
But it's a great platformer, and even though it's a bit of a collectathon at times, it's a lot of fun. So we're gonna play Mumbo's Mountain, which is one of the more memorable tracks, I would probably say, from this game. There are a lot of tracks in this soundtrack, actually.
Yeah,
but some of them are kind of remix versions of tracks.
Have like a K version of the song and an underwater version of the song.
Right, exactly.
And that was kind of not heard very much either back in this day. Multiple tracks, and one of the good things about the N64 is that it was MIDI style. It was all sequenced music. It took up a lot less space than the streaming audio or the CD audio that you would have on the early PlayStation games. So they were able to fit a ton more music in. So especially with artists like Grant Kirkhope and Dave Wise and Robin Beanland, we were able to get a lot of music from these awesome composers.
That's right.
So this is just one of many totally awesome tracks that's on the Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack.
The Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack has a lot of instrumentation that you don't hear regularly in a lot of other games. There's a lot of banjo work in terms of like Mario 64, which we'll hear a track from that later.
Is there a lot of kazoo work?
There's not a lot of kazoo work, but there is a lot of xylophone work in this soundtrack, which I love. I really like the simplicity of it, and I think that Grant Kirkhope designed something that was both kid-friendly, but also like just fun to listen to, and it never got really repetitive as you were going through the levels.
And if you're familiar with Grant Kirkhope's other work, we've played Perfect Dark in the past on a previous episode. You can kind of compare that style to this very kid-friendly style and kind of understand the range of musicality that this composer has. So it's really cool to kind of compare those.
Grant Kirkhope's soundtrack for Perfect Dark is one of my favorites on the N64, and even though we did just recently play a track, so that's why I didn't pick a track from this game, I would say that, just like you said, going from that to this, it's like two different worlds.
Yeah.
And even when you hear him do like GoldenEye and everything, I mean, each game that he composed for set the mood perfectly for each soundtrack, so I think he did a great job. So why don't we go ahead and give a listen to Mumbo's Mountain off of the Banjo Kazooie soundtrack. This game came out in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, and let's hit it.
Enjoy. thank you for coming all the way from the New York Konami office. We hope you'll enjoy your visit here at Rare. Please, have a seat.
Hey, no problem. What you guys are doing with the Nintendo 64 is killer. So any ideas you would have would be great to bring back to the senior execs in Japan. So, what do you got for me?
Well, we've come up with a few designs that would be a great way to market to a Nintendo audience. We've been working very hard at building a rapport with Nintendo fans, and we know Konami's been struggling a bit. But even though this format is more expensive to develop for, with the right touch, we think fans of the Nintendo 64 would love a Konami-Rare Nintendo partnership.
Alrighty, let's see what you got then.
Our first game is a take on Castlevania 64, which would be called Castlevania Legacy of Harmony in Moonlight with Sonata in Requiem and Harpsichords. Here's a brief movie clip we designed.
Well, hey there, Belmont clan member Reinhard Schneider, or whatever your name is. My name is Dracula, and I'm the bad guy here. Press B to learn all about how to use your whip.
This seems to be going terribly wrong. Aren't I supposed to whip you or something?
Well, you've got some 3D platforming to do, so hop to it.
Well, what do you think?
Looks like a weird combination of Banjo Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day. It doesn't seem to capture the whole Castlevania atmosphere.
Well, why not give it to Mercury Steam? They seem to ruin everything they touch.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. Just a little fortune telling. Here's the next game, Metal Gear Solid: A Vengeance Revengeance EX. It's a port of your classic Metal Gear Solid, but redone for the Nintendo audience.
Liquid, I can't believe you'd stoop to this level. Bringing back Metal Gear Rex from the dead and renaming him Metal Gear Phil, that's just in bad taste.
Well, you know, dear brother, I'd love to stay and chat, but I've got Meryl tied up and waiting for me in the chopper for a little bit of the old...
What the heck is that?
Well, we had to take some liberties with the mature content in your Metal Gear games. No hard feelings anyways. We know you don't have a sequel yet for this game. So here's an idea for Silent Hill 2. Cheryl! Cheryl! Man, I can't see anything in this. Cheryl!
Hey, this is just a game with N64 fog. Come on, guys. I thought we could work together, but it's obvious that these ideas just not a good fit for Konami. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Oh, drat. Do you think it was the N64 fog that turned them away?
I don't know. Let's call Capcom next. I've got some great ideas for a Mega Man Jet Force Gemini combination.
Oh, too right.
Welcome back. That was Jet Force Gemini, another Rare title. We're giving you a full-on Rare block, getting it out of the way because it's just so awesome and your pants just can't contain it. This is that great.
It's not very rare if there's so many of them.
Well, that's true.
I wonder why they were called Rare.
Well, they were originally called Rareware.
It was Rare Coin It, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Yeah, well, originally they came out with that game Jetpack way back when. But
Yeah.
this isn't a Rare show. This is a Nintendo 64 show.
No, but this is the Rare block of Nintendo 64.
Ah, true. So this song was called SS Anubis. It is when you were on the SS Anubis.
I thought it was Anubis.
I always called it Anubis.
Anubis is the...
Is it
the-
Anubis?
the-
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah,
It's
you're
an
right.
Egyptian
like
dog god.
Yeah. This track was composed by Robin Beanland, Graeme Norgate, and Alistair Lindsay.
Correct.
Yes.
And they were... Well, at least Robin Beanland and Graeme Norgate have huge histories with
Right.
Rare. They were basically, in-house composers along with Grant Kirkhope and David Wise.
Right.
Robin Beanland, we've talked about Robin before quite a bit. It started off in Donkey Kong Country, worked all the way up until very recently, worked on a couple of Kinect games, Kinect Play Fit, and then Kinect Sports Rivals for the Xbox One.
Is Graeme Norgate still with them? Probably freelancing.
He's going to be scoring Homefront: The Revolution, which is coming out in 2016 for PS4, Xbox One, and Windows.
Okay.
He went to Free Radical.
That's right.
He started doing Time Splitters and Jet Force Gemini and Perfect Dark were the last two Rare games that he worked on consecutive years. and then went over to Time Splitters in 2000, which released on the PS2.
Right.
And then Alistair Lindsay was not really a Rare person at all.
Wasn't he a sound guy? Like sound engineer or something like that?
He did composition, but also was general sound credits in some video games. So stuff like iToy, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Thrillville Off the Rails, and Thrillville. So Jet Force Gemini was the only game that he actually scored music for Rare. However, he did voices in both Jet Force Gemini and Perfect Dark.
Okay.
The song's a cool song. The symphonic sound font is very, very good.
It is.
For MIDI-style sound sequencing.
Rare did a fantastic job with every track that they worked on because they always made a track sound exactly like you wanted it to sound. So it sounded...
What if I wanted it to be all cat meows?
They would do it. They would knock it out the park.
Sweet.
They did such an excellent job with making songs sound like real instruments. Like when you heard the guitar in GoldenEye, I mean, that just sounded so good. And so here you've got a very symphonic soundtrack that's mixed really well and integrated really well with newer electronic sounds. It's almost like, I would even dare to say it's like kind of like the RoboCop soundtrack for the RoboCop movie, where you've got this very like symphonic sound to it with these clanging drums in the background that kind of build, and it's like the track is actually being built while you're listening to it almost.
Yeah,
it has that cool feel to it.
It does fit the game very well because it's a kind of a cinematic. The game almost feels lonely in parts too,
does,
where you're it's just you against the world for the most part. But then there's very organic, kind of foresty, swampy scenes, as well as high-tech installations and spaceships that you're in as well. So this soundtrack, or this particular track, has kind of elements of what I would feel would fit in both those kind of environments.
Yeah, the game takes place in this world where it's basically outer space, and you go to all these various different planets. You play as one of three characters: Juno, Vila, and
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. Lupus. And Lupus is a dog, basically a space dog, and he can kind of hover. He has this like hover ability, which is cool.
Dogs in space.
Juno is, if I recall, I think he
really
can walk
old web
on,
browser.
Yeah. He can walk on lava, and Vila can swim underwater. And so she is the, I don't know, I had a weird thing.
So it's
with
kind of
her.
like
I kind of had a crush on her.
Yeah, but you have a crush on everyone.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. No, I was in high school. I was like in a weird I liked Tifa, but
Oh, so you were cheating on Tifa,
I was cheating on Tifa with Vila.
I'm gonna tell Tifa, man.
Oh man,
she's gonna be pissed.
I know, dude. Don't say anything. Like me and my friends would argue with each other, like, "Oh, N64 is better. No, PlayStation's better." And like all the N64 fans would make fun of the PlayStation fans, and they would call them the Jaggies.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah, you like that? So they would be the Jaggies, and the N64 guys would be the Muddies.
The Muddies.
Yeah, because everything looked like mud.
Perfect.
Yeah, and
I would be calling them the Foggies.
The Foggies. I mean, you know what I think the whole thing with the fog is? I think it's Superman 64. I think that game ruined that had
There are a lot of games that have
much
fog in it.
fog. There are. But man, Superman 64 had so much fog.
Yeah, even Jet Force Gemini. I had never played Jet Force Gemini before, and Mike and I got together a couple nights before this, played some N64 games, and kind of shared the titles that we weren't familiar with each other. And even in Jet Force Gemini, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of fog. There's not much else going on around, and there's fog everywhere.
Yeah.
But at least with Rare, the fog was gray. It looked like regular fog, and we were in a swampy environment where fog might naturally occur.
Yeah.
But it's like
you were at like a space station and there was fog.
Yeah, well, especially on the racing games like Extreme G Racing and stuff on the N64, where the fog would be like orange or purple, and it's like it's unnatural looking. Like it draws attention to itself. You've got to have a design sense to make it look like fog should be there. So whatever.
Yeah.
One game that has very good draw distance is Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is our next game coming out. Now, this one was one of the biggest cartridges, memory-wise, to have come out. It was 512 megabits.
Well, there was a lot of voice acting in this game.
A lot of voice acting.
It was all really good. I mean, it all sounded very lower quality because it was the N64. It was all really, really good. Very funny game.
Yeah, and it's also the first title of the podcast that took advantage of the expansion pack.
That's true.
Which was an extra 4 megabits of RAM that the N64 could take advantage of for extra textures, to quickly load in music and voices and all that stuff. So it was a much more well-rounded package when you had the expansion pack.
I agree.
And so Conker's Bad Fur Day is... It's a unique game in the N64, especially because of its rating.
Yeah, it is one of the first... Well, I can't say it's not the first mature game, because, I mean, all the Turok games and, Resident Evil 2 came out on the system.
It's the first M-rated game for content other than violence.
Right. Yeah, a lot of sexual content, a lot of... drugs and alcohol and smoking, and
I know the N64 was getting a reputation as a kids machine.
That's it, exactly it.
And they really wanted to branch out into a more adult or young adult audience. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this game really succeeded in doing that, but
this game got a lot of attention.
Yeah, it was one of those negative. Any kind of attention is good attention.
Right.
So it got a lot of negative.
Well,
attention.
It went after the South Park crowd a lot of times. Mm-hmm. I mean, they advertised on Comedy Central. They advertised in Playboy. They went after the PlayStation crowd. They went for the jugular with this game, and I think it made people second guess what Nintendo was doing. And even with Jet Force Gemini, getting back to that, the characters were originally supposed to be much, much younger, and Nintendo approached them and was like, no, make them older, make them young adults, make them older so that, kids, make it a teen game, because there's blood and, even if it was green alien blood or whatever, but still, there was blood.
Yeah.
So, Conker had all of that.
Rare made it very obvious that it was going to be an adult game from the get-go. I mean, even that first scene where it's an exact rip on Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
He's sitting on the throne, and,
there's a lot of movie references.
If you're gonna get Clockwork Orange, then you're definitely gonna be an older person, because that came out,
I agree that it was definitely going for a more adult crowd, but I also think that they were going for what was popular then too, because you got to remember the Matrix had just come out.
Yep.
And they had that scene in the game with the Matrix where they're making fun of the Matrix, and that was really funny. I mean, everybody was doing Matrix parodies back then, but it was cool to see it in a video game. It's of course dated, but it was cool back then to see.
Yeah. There was a lot of topical stuff which didn't really happen in video games that much. So Robin Beanland also wrote this soundtrack, as well as the Jet Force Gemini soundtrack we just heard. The cool thing about it is that Robin Beanland actually co-wrote the screenplay for this game as well.
Oh, really?
With Chris Even.
Okay.
So you kind of get a hint as to what Robin Beanland's sense of humor is like.
Yes. This track doesn't sound like any other track, I would say, in the game.
No, this one is called Rock Solid.
And it is rock solid.
Yeah. Do you remember where it plays?
So if I recall correctly, you're in this nightclub and you're completely wasted. And you're walking around, you're peeing on these guys, and then you gotta put them out, because I'm pretty sure they're on fire. If I recall, I may be wrong because it's been a really long time since I played this part in the game. I definitely know it takes place in a nightclub though. And so you're listening to this song and you're just like, yeah, this is awesome. And me and my friends, I was talking about this before on the break, me and my friends used to drive around to this song and blast it, and when the bass drops, which you'll hear in a minute, you're gonna get, 3-4 minutes in the song, because it's a long song, and then the bass drops, and then it picks up, and it's got and you're just like, yeah, so you gotta go listen to this song in your car.
Yes.
With an awesome system.
It's definitely, it's just pure trance.
And be
with
drunk.
A little bit of house.
Be drunk when you listen to this song.
Just don't be driving in your car while you're drunk.
No.
Gotcha.
I definitely have not done this before.
I can tell. Not advocating drunken driving at all on the show.
Absolutely not. Don't drink and drive, kids.
So I say we get into the music.
I agree.
Because this is a good track.
This is a great track.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Totally straight up trance.
Totally straight up trance with a little bit of house.
Yeah, a little bit.
There's a little house towards the end with those keyboard stabs.
Very true.
It's very fun.
So this is Rock Solid. Conker's Bad Fur Day. Game came out in 2000 by Rare for the Nintendo 64.
Hope you're not hungover after this. Welcome back. That was F-Zero X, released in 1998, and that was a first-party title, our first one of the podcast. That one was called Devil's Call in Your Heart.
Aw.
Which, I don't know, I kind of envision a little telephone in your heart, or the devil's calling it.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a devil's call in your heart.
That's the sound that you hear, the voice during the song. It's like,
Hello, give me cookies.
Ooh, cookies.
yeah.
I like cookies.
Yeah, the devil loves cookies.
So for a sequenced soundtrack that's a very metal and a very accurate metal soundtrack, all of those guitars are all samples played over and over again. The guitar solos I like a lot because it sounds like a real guitar solo,
Yeah.
but if you kind of really listen to it, you can kind of hear the notes and that they're bending it just very accurately to sound like a real overdriven guitar. Taro, Bando, and Hajime Wakai are behind this soundtrack. Hajime Wakai we've talked about a little bit. He did all the music for Nintendo Land, so on the Ninja episode.
Oh, that's right.
Takamaru's Ninja Castle, that boss track that we played, was
Right.
composed by Hajime Wakai. But he started off way back in Yoshi's Story, and his first actual composition was for Star Fox 64. And then he's just pretty much been doing Nintendo music all the way up to the present day. His most recent game was Pikmin 3. And then Taro Bando also, well, so for an extremely metal soundtrack like this, I mean, he's worked on Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, like lots of really cartoony style, soundtracks. So there's not much else that's come out that's come this close to being this heavy. So, I mean, you were saying that this was almost like a Slayer track, right?
Yeah, so I picked this track, and there were a lot of really good tracks on this soundtrack. I'm not the biggest F-Zero fan. I can appreciate the game for what it is, but I know friends of mine that are super, super into F-Zero. I never really got into it. I didn't even really like the Super Nintendo game.
I loved the Super Nintendo game.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the GameCube and the N64 games too.
Okay.
I didn't get super into them, but I played through the cups. But I didn't play competitively or with a bunch of friends and stuff. I do appreciate the fact that their focus for the games was everything must be 60 frames per second. It must be smooth. It must be fast. But it also makes the scenery a little bit boring. There's not much to look at while you're racing. So it's pretty much like the purest kind of racing game you can possibly get.
Yeah.
Because it's all speed. It's all tons of cars or whatever you call them, ships on the track along with you at once. So it's a cool racing experience, but not a visual treat.
I would agree to disagree about the GameCube version, because I often got lost looking at all the tracks, specifically the tracks, and I would get lost with all the loop-de-loops and all the stuff that you would do in the game. Because the GameCube version...
but that's all part of the gameplay. I'm talking about scenery outside of the tracks.
Yeah, but I mean
buildings or trees or whatever.
I would get distracted by the actual levels themselves.
Yeah, no, that I agree with, because they were pretty roller coaster.
They were crazy, yeah. But with the N64 version, I agree with you there that there is not much to look at. So as I was saying before, I was in high school at the time when I had an N64. Didn't really play much of this game, to be honest, but this soundtrack always had fantastic music, and this track in particular really called to me because I was in high school. I liked a lot of different types of metal, but I was super, super into metal. That's actually at the time, right around the time when I really got into metal. At the time, I was really into Slayer, and I remember listening to this track and being like, oh my god, that is a Slayer track. So I was thinking in my head, if I had played this game during my high school years, I would have listened to this song. I would have somehow figured out how to get this soundtrack so that I could listen to it around the house. So that's how good the music is in this. I mean, it's just balls to the wall, awesome, really great, speedy thrash music.
Yeah, and it worked so well with this game that they decided to keep the same theme for the GameCube version as well, F-Zero GX. So, metal and F-Zero, peanut butter and chocolate.
It's true. Yeah, all the music in the F-Zero games, for the most part, is a lot more melodic, I would say, than this track.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really dig this track. So, our next track is the complete opposite, and it is from Mario 64.
You just threw this in because you were afraid the internet would hate you for not doing Mario 64.
No, I think so. I mean, you can't do a Nintendo 64 themed episode without playing a track from Mario 64. This game was just so darn innovative. I mean, in almost every
so darn fun.
way. Yeah. Oh, it's a great, great game. we're gonna obviously play the most famous track, I would say, which is the main theme, Overworld. And like I said, just a complete reversal of the track that we just played. This is very happy, bouncy. I don't even know what instrumentation you can call it.
Most of the like remixes that you hear is almost big band. So you get like a brass section doing the main theme with like an upright bass or a very soft, like warm style bass, and just a regular drum kit. And it seems to be pretty accurate to the song.
Yeah, a lot of the actual instrumentation that they use, I would say, is probably the best comparison is big band. But then they have these like little instruments, like the main synth, like that do 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 do. I mean, a lot of that is just. I think because the system was in such an infant state that they didn't really know how to make the music step away from MIDI and actually sound like real instruments.
Well, this is also Koji Kondo, though. I mean, MIDI is his bag. I mean, MIDI's sound and cartoony is his bag. You know, he's not looking to really recreate live instrumentation or anything.
At least not now, or at least not then. Now, of course, with the budget that games like Mario Galaxy had, for example, I mean, he had the ability to be like, all right, I'm going to compose all this stuff and then basically be an orchestra, head and conductor and basically conduct this music that I wrote. So yeah, in the newer games, of course, Koji Kondo has basically the freedom to do whatever he wants. Nintendo's basically like, here's a bag of money.
We trust you with our lives.
Yeah, basically. But in this state of infancy that the N64 was in, I just kind of feel like these tracks are just carryovers from Super Nintendo stuff. I mean, like really high-end Super Nintendo music.
Yeah, and it totally works.
Oh yeah, no, it sounds great. I mean, the track's a lot of fun to listen to. You're going to be hearing this track over and over and over again throughout the whole game, so it's kind of one of those tracks that you can't get out of your head after you listen to it.
I think there were only 2 launch games when the system came out. It was Pilot Wings 64
Pilot Wings, yeah.
and Mario 64. So you either enjoyed flying or you enjoyed Mario. That was it.
This system was, I think, one of the worst launches in the history of video games because literally it launched with Mario 64, Pilot Wings, and then that was it for like months, like 8 months.
And
then like Turok came out.
Yeah, such a difference from the Super Nintendo where it was like, I mean, there weren't too many games when the SNES came out, but the library grew to be so humongous. And you're like, oh, here's a new Nintendo system. Here are the 2 games you can play.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? And I'm paying how much for the system?
Yeah.
So
it was rough. It was really rough and that's one of the reasons why I didn't adopt the system at first, and I kind of waited for more games to come out before I got it. And as I said on previous podcasts, my parents were like, you can get an N64 or you can get a computer. And that was back in 96. And I was like, computer. All the way, because there were literally 2 games out and I only really wanted Mario.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm not going to just get one system for Mario. I mean, sure, there's going to be games down the road. There's going to be Metroid.
Nope.
Wah, wah.
Dude, it would just be like Samus and the Fog Planet. Samus and the Muddy Fog Planet.
Yeah. Samus in the Fog. Beat Mother Fog.
But, yeah. Basically, we got the system with Mario. We never ended up getting Pilot Wings. And Mario just kind of sat as like a permanent fixture in the N64 for a couple months until new games started coming out. And I think maybe that's why I kind of gravitated away from it, because there were already so many awesome PlayStation games out there. So I was just kind of playing those. My brother would play Mario 64. And I would play it too, but not nearly as much.
So you got it with the system.
And well, because what else are you going to do?
I bought Mario 64 for $14 off of a friend. Bought it, took it, brought it home, didn't work, I had to clean the contacts.
Oh, God.
Put it in, start playing it, and I'm like, this is awesome. This is like the best $14 I ever spent.
It's pretty good.
Because I waited so long to play the game, and I had only played it in Toys R Us over and over and over and over again. And then I had Zelda, and I was hooked on Zelda 64, beat it, and then was like, what else am I going to play?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, Mario.
Might as well play the next best game in the library. All right, let's get into the music. Guys, you either know this song and love it, or you don't know this song and you're weird because you've been living under a rock for the past decade.
Right.
Anyways,
2 decades.
2 decades. It's coming up on 20 years. Shoot me now. Here's the main theme overworld from Super Mario 64, released in 1996 from Koji Kondo.
Welcome back. That was a little track from a game that I used to play all the time with me and my brother. Mario Golf came out in 1999, and this was from the Koopa Cup.
Mario Golf was developed by Camelot. This was kind of a second party-ish, kind of. Camelot originally started off as Sega CD-4, but was quickly renamed to Sonic Software Planning, and they worked on all the Shining titles, like Shining Darkness and Shining Force and all that stuff for the Genesis. They broke off from Sega and then started working for Sony, which is when they made the Hot Shots Golf series.
Right.
And then so they developed Hot Shots Golf, and then Nintendo was like, wow, we really like that golf. Can you come work for us? So they started working for Nintendo. And
they went full circle.
Yeah, and then they started doing some Mario Golf, Mario Tennis. They did Golden Sun. They did Mario Golf World Tour for the 3DS, I think was the last one that came out, all developed from Camelot.
Right.
And their golf, I love their golf. Like, you can throw PGA and Tiger Woods and whatever out the window, because Hot Shots Golf and Mario Golf series are like the most fun golf series you can ever play.
No, the control is so good in this game. It's so tight and it's so friendly too. Like, anybody can pick up and play this game, even if you know nothing about golf.
And it's one of those easy to learn, hard to master kind of deals.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun, and they came up with good ways to keep you interested. So you have to actually play the characters and beat them, like get enough badges to beat them to unlock them. So it kind of keeps you playing to unlock new characters and find out what they can do. Every character has their own animations and voices, and there's weather, and I mean, they really just went all out with the original Mario Golf game.
They did a really good job with designing the environment, and I think part of the music is a large part of that, because a lot of this music is very calming, very soothing music. Yes. It's very like whimsical without being cheesy. Almost like easy listening.
The guys from Legacy Music Hour would call this elevator music.
Elevator music?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they do entire shows based on elevator music, which is music that sounds kind of like it's kind of like a unexplainable quality that the music has to it. That kind of like loungy, calm.
They call that muzak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Motoi Sakuraba worked on this soundtrack.
Boy, did he.
Along with a million other soundtracks. I mean, he's done so many games for the Tales of Fantasia series for Namco. Worked on Mario Golf, Mario Tennis, Golden Sun. Worked on a lot of Camelot games. Ended up kind of pairing up with Namco for a while, and was working with Namco and Enix on like the Star Ocean series, Valkyrie Profile, those types of games. Have really been primarily their keystone productions. Sakuraba actually composed for a lot of those games, so was very much kind of the RPG dude for Enix, and worked on a lot of Tri-Ace games, and also worked with like a lot of Monolith Soft games for Nintendo, like Baten Kaidos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean, and Eternal Sonata, which was actually an Xbox 360 game. Of course. Worked on Smash Brothers Ball, Smash Brothers Melee. So this guy has worked on tons and tons and tons of games. He's done a lot of music with like Baroque music along with progressive rock. So he kind of combined a lot of his
whole
styles. Right, exactly. So he has a lot of versatility.
Agreed.
Word.
I especially like his golf soundtracks. I mean, obviously I'm not a big symphonic or cinematic music fan.
Sure.
But his golf soundtracks have always just been so calming, very soothing, fun to play the game with, and it doesn't get in the way, you know?
Right.
Like with golf, in real life, everything's supposed to be quiet and still and nobody talks. But you can play this music during a video game golf game and not lose your concentration. I think it helps your concentration.
And I think with the Mario Golf games, it makes you feel like you're actually playing golf, because I could listen to this soundtrack and I could totally like put headphones on, listen to this soundtrack while I'm actually playing golf, and it wouldn't even set me back. I would be like, this is so floaty and happy. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit this hole-in-one.
Right.
Oh no.
I'm excited about the next game.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's Rakuga Kids.
Rakuga Kids!
Now, Rakuga Kids
is a game that should have come out in the United States.
Gravy.
Oh, we missed this one.
This one is a 2D fighting game.
Right.
Not a beat-em-up game. One-on-one. And it's absolutely fantastic.
It takes the art style from Parappa and turns it into a fighting game.
Yeah, basically these kids find magic crayons in a cave, and whatever they draw comes to life. So one of the kids' brothers, who's older and he's a big bully, draws this character that starts to terrorize the neighborhood. So these other kids have to draw their own characters to kind of fight against this bigger, badder character. He's not even that big. So that's pretty much the premise of the game. It's very, very well presented. The artwork is fantastic. The graphic, it's like super high resolution. You know, everything is completely
Everything is
sharp.
very
There's
clean.
no blur.
Right.
It's like pixel perfect.
Yeah.
So the characters themselves they're 2D, but they're like, it's graffiti come to life.
Right.
So they're not actually like up against the wall fighting. So you see like high resolution, transparent shadows behind them. So it gives it a good sense of depth. And the levels themselves are kind of quasi-realistic looking without being too like photorealistic, but they just look good. I mean, I really can't say anything else other than it's excellently put together.
It's such a shame that this game did not come out in the States because it plays really well. It sounds great. As far as the actual gameplay goes, it has a very
It's got the
Street
6-button
Fighter feel to
Yeah.
it. And I'm talking early Street Fighter, like Street Fighter 2. It's slow enough that you can you can have fun and you'll see every move that your character is doing and you'll enjoy watching this game while you're playing it. And so every little attack is kind of like a new surprise and like a new thing that you can like light up and be like, oh, that's so funny. Like he launched a miniature bear out of his butt or whatever. Like, you know, like he shot a bearzuka cannon at me and
because the characters
Kitty.
are cartoony, all the moves
Right,
are cartoony.
it's very
so if you think of like
cartoony.
some of the more wacky characters from like Guilty Gear, like Faust or whatever,
Right.
where every single move kind of turns you into a different shape. That's the way all these characters are. And the
there's-
frames of animation is like, it's like super, super smooth.
Yeah.
And they got around that texture memory problem that the N64 has by making them graffiti characters. So they're all solid colors. So the frames, you know, each image doesn't take up a lot of memory. So there's a little bit of a pause as the levels are loading. So you got to wait like 15 to 30 seconds for the levels to load before. But
it was a lot long.
It felt long for a cartridge.
It felt long for a cart, but at the same time, I was never bored. Like I was just happy watching the screen
Yeah.
and watching the little things go, you know, like the little characters on the screen. And then, you know, the game starts and I was like, oh, that was fast.
Yeah. The music was composed by Tomoya Tomita, Kozo Nakamura, and Masuhiko Kimura. And it's just great, strummy, like almost like American rock. It's
Oh, yeah.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's just, oh my god. I can't even say enough of how angry I am that this game never came out because it is absolutely perfect for the Nintendo 64 American market. It's kid-friendly, but it's also really fun and different.
And pretty deep,
And
too.
deep.
Yeah.
And so you can pick up and play it and be like, oh, that was fun. But it's more deep than a game like Clay Fighters, which has a very similar style in terms of like what they were going for without all the grossness behind it.
Yeah, agreed.
So it's basically Street Fighter for kids, but really fun and really entertaining enough so that adults can get deep into it and have a lot of fun learning and mastering all the moves and whatnot. And then it has special moves too. So you could do like a special move and they wipe you out. I mean, Ed and I were going
crazy.
back and forth playing this game. I would do the special move and just completely annihilate him and then he would do the same to me. And we went back and forth, but we had fun each time playing the game. So
I think
it's
my
really
favorite
good.
one was I was playing as the last boss, the bad guy,
Right.
with the cape, and his special move is he ducks into a phone booth that just magically appears.
Yeah.
And he says, "I'd like to order a pizza."
Yeah.
And then 2 seconds later, a scooter runs across with a pizza.
Yeah.
And it runs your character over. It's just crazy and creative stuff.
I have a theory as to why the game didn't come out in the United States, and I think it's because of all the little nuanced things that we found throughout the game that we were like, I don't think that would fly in American markets.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, didn't we see, like, Jesus was here or something
There
like
was
that on the
a
wall?
graffiti. It was on the wall. It said "Jesus loves you."
Jesus loves you, that's right.
It was very blurry, like you could barely make it out, but it definitely
yeah,
said
it
that.
definitely said Jesus loves
And
you.
then each character has a taunt, which you can use, I think, using the R button.
Right.
And one of the characters, like, wiggles their butt. And it's cartoony, but you
Right.
can clearly see butt cheeks.
Right, right.
Stuff that Nintendo could have easily edited out if they wanted to bring it out.
Right.
in
If
the
they
US.
really wanted to, I mean, the Jesus thing would have had to go.
Right.
That
but that's
without a doubt.
super simple, just
Yeah.
wipe it clean. But,
Yeah.
I just don't know why this never came out. It was 98. It wasn't like it was like the total end of the N64's
It
life.
was only a couple years after Parappa came out. This would have
This would have been great.
This would have sold
Yeah.
like hotcakes if they really promoted the bejesus out of
Yeah.
it.
I mean, unfortunately, the only way you can really play this game in the US now is if you emulate it, or if you have some sort of a flash cart that you can, just load it up. And they don't make N64 repros, so it's like...
They don't really? That's a shame.
I've never seen them. I mean, I'm sure they could be made, but I don't think there's a big enough market for it because the majority of...
Not yet, because it's too expensive right now to do something like that, and there aren't enough carts, I think.
Let's talk about the composers a little bit. Tomoya Tomita, definitely, I remember him because he did the soundtrack for Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project.
Right.
One of my favorite NES soundtracks of all time. He did a lot of sound direction and production, but not necessarily music. He did production for the Mystical Ninja games,
Right.
which is cool because those had excellent soundtracks. He also worked on Konami Crazy Racers. He was the producer for that one.
Which we played in the Game Boy Advance episode.
Yep. And composed the music for Wario Land Shake It. Did sound effects for Kirby's Epic Yarn. His last game was Me Force, and he did the music and sound effects for that in 2013.
Oh, that was one of the downloadable titles, if I recall.
Yeah.
For the 3DS.
Yeah, it wasn't too much music in that.
No.
Kozo Nakamura also co-composed Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project with Tomoya Tomita. Didn't work on too much stuff after Rakuga Kids did the Castlevania Legacy of Darkness, did the sound effects for that. And then Konami Crazy Racers did some voice, but other than that, hasn't seen any music since 2001, at least not in the video game industry. And then Masahiko Kimura composed the music for Legacy of Darkness. There's credits here for Castlevania, which came out in '99, with no...
That'd be the 64 game.
Castlevania 64?
Yeah.
Was it just called Castlevania?
It was just called Castlevania. It wasn't called Castlevania 64.
Oh, okay.
It got dubbed Castlevania 64 by the public.
Oh, because it was just a way to differentiate from
Basically.
the other one. Anyway, so he composed Castlevania.
We can call it Castlevania 64. It's
Yeah.
fine. I think the kids will be okay with that.
Yeah. And then also did Spectrobes, which had a really good soundtrack.
It was like Konami's version of Pokemon, wasn't it?
Everybody's got a version of Pokemon.
That's true.
So people have multiple versions of Pokemon.
Very true.
Konami's also got, Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Did they?
Was that Konami?
Oh, that was
Yeah.
very Pokemon.
Yep.
And Digimon, I think, too.
Kimura's last known title was GQ Powerful Pro Yakyu 15 in 2008.
That's a mouthful.
Baseball game. So anyways, let's get on to the music.
Yes.
This is really excellently scored. This is called Orange Bridge from Rakuga Kids on the N64. It's Iggy's Wrecking Balls. Wreck your balls with your friends.
Oh man, you totally wrecked my balls.
You don't know what fun is until you've had your balls wrecked again and again.
That's it, Billy. You've wrecked my balls for the last time. Prepare your balls for some major retribution.
Iggy's Wrecking Balls is a game about balls and wrecking them. Wreck your friends' balls. Wreck your own balls. We don't care whose balls you wreck, as long as you wreck some balls.
Oh no, you wrecked all my balls. Now I don't have any more balls left for you to wreck.
Your balls are mine.
Iggy's Wrecking Balls for the Nintendo 64. Wreck some balls today. Hello, everyone. I hope your balls are sufficiently wrecked.
Oh, my balls are so wrecked.
That track was from Iggy's Wrecking Balls. And, man, I don't know.
I'm angry that you made me play this.
Why?
Because it was awful.
It is pretty bad.
It's really bad.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
If you haven't played this before,
It's worth playing once and then never playing again. And I think the comment that both of us made that you were like, you said it and I was like, oh my God, that's totally true, is back in the day, I would rent this once from Blockbuster and never play it again.
yeah,
And that
you'd
is-
probably play it while you had it home.
Right.
You know, you'd play it for the 3 or 5 days or whatever
like
it was.
Milo's Astrolane, same thing.
But then you would return it,
Right.
and you would never rent it again, and you would not ask for it
right.
for Hanukkah or
yeah,
whatever.
or Christmas or whatever. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, totally true.
And there were so many games like that back in the day
Oh,
that
yes.
I would rent and be like, it's cool, but I don't want to own this one.
That whole era, man, just reeked of awkward 3D gameplay.
So let's put this in a little perspective. This was created by Iguana Entertainment, which was a subsidiary of Acclaim. Now, in 1998, when this game came out, Iguana, one studio,
Right.
released NHL Breakaway 99, All-Star Baseball 99, Forsaken 64, Iggy's Wrecking Balls, Turok 2, NFL Quarterback Club 99, NHL Breakaway 99, NBA Jam 99, and South Park in 1 year.
I mean, their developers were obviously they must have had a huge team.
They must have had huge vats of cocaine.
They must have had a huge team because I mean, Turok alone was a fantastic game.
That was their
Turok
flagship
2.
title.
Oh,
It must have
absolutely.
been.
That and South Park. I mean, South Park was a lot of fun, even though it was overly simplistic.
And most of those sports games are probably just recycled,
Dozen.
updated code from the
Right.
the previous year's
Exactly.
games. But it's like, I mean, come on. Iggy's Wrecking Balls was probably a low man on the totem pole.
Right.
It's just this little concept that one of the developer guys had, and they were like, "Oh, well, this looks kind of cool.
What if we
can
had a
kinda
bunch
go
of
with this."
balls
and just wreck them?
and we just wreck just wreck those balls, man.
So it kind of plays like,
that's a great idea.
I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong if you don't agree with this,
Okay.
but it's a combination of Uniracers and Bionic Commando. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's strangely accurate.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You're on like kind of a horizontal track like in Uniracers,
Yeah.
but you can grab upward like you were in Bionic Commando or one
Except-
of those kind of grappling
All
kind
right,
of games.
I'm gonna slightly correct you.
Okay.
It's like if Bionic Commando and Uniracers had a baby, but the baby was just like, it had like feces smeared all over its face all the time.
Giant balls.
Yeah, and giant balls all over its chin. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
That
Game's
you
not
agree?
good.
That is it.
Game's not good.
It's not good. What is up with us picking games that are not good?
Well, the music is good. That's the thing.
So let's talk about the music. So what did you? This is your track.
Yes.
From your terrible game.
See, so
why did you pick this track?
I think cool because you picked all your tracks first.
And I did.
So
pick
you
some
picked
amazing.
a lot of the
I picked the cream of the crop. Let's face it.
well, you picked a lot of the Rare games and a lot of the NES
Literally.
games. So or NES games, a lot of the Nintendo developed games. So I wanted to
Right.
kind of go into the third party games.
Okay.
And I also wanted to, because you picked a lot of the symphonic and more cartoony style, so I wanted to pick some of the more adult, like popular music
Right,
kind
like
of
pop
songs.
music at that time.
And I also
right.
wanted to pick some of those what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, where they were games that were very simple, so they had more processing power for more technologically advanced music. So as you heard in this, there were a lot of very big samples and voices and long drawn out, audio clips and such, which takes up a lot of memory.
Right.
So I was telling Mike while in between breaks, there's a portion in this game where you go over a big loop and the camera kind of pulls back to show you go around the big loop, and as the rest of the track, it's not even that much behind the loop, but it just completely disappears. There's no draw distance whatsoever in this game. So obviously all the processing power is going straight into the music.
Yeah.
I don't know why they chose to do that.
It's a very simple look for the game.
Yeah.
And it doesn't match the music at all because the music's kind of all over the place, whereas the gameplay is very, very, very simple. And I guess you could say that it's a bit challenging because if you've never played the game, I never played the game and you showed me and you had spent a little bit of time and not a crazy amount, and we were both playing and you were definitely doing better than me, but I had to catch on and it was I can't go up here, I can't climb this way with my ball. Basically you're these balls and you're climbing with my ball grabber, and it's this arm or whatever, this claw, whatever it is, and you basically climb these various different areas and you can shoot really fast, you can get a turbo boost and shoot through the loop-de-loops or whatever. So
you can shoot your balls.
You can shoot your balls through the loop-de-loop, yeah. So it's such a weird game that feels more like a tech demo than anything.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's sad that it actually came out as a retail.
Yeah. Because I would never, as we were saying when we were playing this game, I would never buy this game, ever.
No.
Even if it was in bargain bin, I would never buy this game.
Yeah. So the music was credited to Roy Wilkins. He doesn't have too many games to his name. He did do the music for Boogerman, which was decent. I remember our buddy Eric really likes the Boogerman soundtrack.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. He did Space Jam, the sound design for Space Jam, and sound effects for NHL Breakaway 98. He was on the sound team for WWF Warzone.
Oh, yeah, Warzone.
And did sound effects for NHL Breakaway 99.
Okay.
So that's pretty much that.
Yeah.
He was Iguana mostly.
Right.
Iguana then turned into Acclaim Studios Austin.
Right.
And so up until 2004, they were still doing games for the Xbox and PlayStation 2. But, it's mostly just sports games.
Yeah.
Sports games in Turok. Turok Evolution was their last non-sports game. 2002.
Let's not talk about that game.
No, it's not very good.
No.
That's why they ended up getting shut down eventually.
Wow.
Kind of unfortunate, but that's the way developers go. And Iguana was never really one of those high-tech, high-tier developers.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, the development world still pretty much belonged to Japan at that point. So any Western developer that was out was just kind of yeah, we make games too. Hi. So a lot of those developer studios that were super famous for making a lot of really excellent games, like the midways of the industry, kind of just disappeared or shut down or just kind of turned into compilation releases as far as their games go. And they were kind of remembered as, in terms of the games of yesteryears, whereas the Japanese developed studios just kept building and building. I mean, their gameplay was getting bigger and better, and I think that this was kind of the beginning of the end for the Japanese market, I would probably say. I mean, in terms of innovation, I think probably this and the PS2 era.
Yeah, I was going to say PS2 was
probably the last real...
There was a lot of good Japanese developed stuff on the PS3.
Yeah, and the 360 and the Wii.
But it kind of fade after that.
Yeah. But in terms of the hierarchy, or as far as how good these games were and how much innovation was coming out of Japan versus coming out of the Western world as far as gameplay goes, I would probably say most likely Japan was winning at that point still. It's very much a Japan market. So all the systems were from Japan.
Right.
So they kind of had Japanese game developers hand over foot at that point.
So speaking of Japan developers and Japanese games, our next game is called Zool, Maju Tsukai Densetsu, which roughly translates to Zool, Legend of the Magical Beast Trainer, or Legend of the Beast Master. I've seen it translated several different ways. This game, it has a really good soundtrack, and It was developed by Pandora Box and published by Imagineer. It came out in 1999, so it was kind of a later release. It's basically kind of similar to like a Pokemon, with a much more RPG feel to it. It's got a ton of dialogue. It's very, very story intensive. So it's Japanese only. There was never a European release or an American release, and nobody's translated the game.
This is a very Japanese game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I was playing it. I was trying to get through it a little bit so I could talk a little bit about it, on the show. I sat there for like a half an hour one night. Just dialogue after dialogue, and it would be like the visual novel kind of thing, with the dialogue's on the bottom and you see the character's head on the top, and whenever the character's head appears, you might hear it giggle or a tee-hee or whatever. Like that was the game.
Right.
And I sat there for a half an hour and I still did not get into the gameplay. And I was fast forwarding through all the dialogue. So if you're actually reading the stuff, imagine how long it would take before you actually got into gameplay.
Yeah.
So I looked at some YouTube videos. I'm like, let's find a playthrough. There's got to be something somewhere.
There's got to be somebody playing this game.
I think there's only 2 people on the entire internet that have, outside of Japan, that have decided to do like playthroughs of this game.
It's clearly my next review.
And it was like 45 minutes before you actually got to your first battle.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy. And the battles look cool. I mean, they're set up kind of almost like a turn-based, like Final Fantasy style.
Like Pokemon
battle.
style?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say more about the game. I really like the music. It's really well put together. The graphics are fantastic. The music is fantastic. The
music is very...
artwork looks fun.
Japanese.
It's very Japanese, but
it is. When you played this track for me, if you didn't tell me that it came out of like a RPG fighting type game, like a Pokemon type game, I would have totally guessed dating sim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one in particular, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's another cool track. So I was going to try to choose between 1 or 2. There's when the bad guys are on the screen during the beginning of the game, and the dialogue is this really cool jazzy big band loungy kind of track that's also really cool. And then there's also some like heavier rock-based tracks on this game too.
Okay, so there's a pretty good mix of various different music.
The soundtrack's available on YouTube. It's really not available anywhere else. You can also find it on my forum thread too, so you can give it a listen and check it out. But that's all I really got to say about the game. The music was composed by Ichiro Nemoto, and the only other credit I've ever been able to find for him on the internet was Arabian Nights Sapago no Soreu from the Super Famicom.
Not the Sega arcade game.
No, Arabian Nights was an RPG.
Okay.
That's all I've been able to find, so not too much to talk about with this game.
Weird.
Unfortunately.
Wow.
But enjoy the music, because it's really good. Racer
64. Yeah.
Yeah. Good game.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ever played it?
Yeah, I played it.
Okay.
Yeah, I owned it. Picked it up cheap years ago. Didn't really like it.
Really?
I'm not a big racing game guy.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I am a big Ridge Racer fan in particular. It's my arcade racer of choice over Daytona.
Okay.
And
You just don't like the music of Daytona.
No, I don't like Daytona either.
Oh.
The whole game as a package, I'm not a big fan of.
Right.
And now the internet's going to throw tomatoes at me, but I've always been a much bigger Ridge Racer fan. And so, as we know, Namco, whenever there's a new system out, Namco's like, oh, can we put Ridge Racer on it? And they put Ridge Racer on it.
Right.
And it doesn't always work out so well, but
No.
for the N64, I think they kind of succeeded.
Well, they launched this late in the life cycle of the N64. I mean, this came out in 2000.
Yep. And it worked pretty well. It had a good combination of all the tracks from like Ridge Racer Renegade and Ridge Racer Revolution and the original one. And the soundtrack was really good, too. This is one of the first Ridge Racers that was developed by Western Development Team.
Oh, okay.
And so there literally wasn't any Japanese hand in this whatsoever, except maybe like overseeing for, brand continuity and stuff like that.
There were a lot of N64 games that were like that. I think, especially with a lot of the Japanese developers, is they were kind of like, let's hand this over to a Western developer.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, even if it was like Konami, for example, created a bunch of games with their branch that they had in like North America. So.
And it didn't always work out so well.
No.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
In this one, they kind of took the graphics aesthetic from R4, Ridge Racer 4, and kind of applied it to the more basic Ridge Racer tracks and stuff like that. A lot of unlockable stuff. Kind of go through a career mode and unlock faster cars as you go. It was just fun. Very basic Ridge Racer experience, but it actually worked well on the N64, which was nice.
Right.
You can control with either the D-pad or the analog, which is nice because I'm a D-pad only Ridge Racer player, which
really?
people find weird, but I think it just makes the drifting so much easier.
Okay.
The music was composed by Keith Aram, and a lot of the tracks are kind of like remixes of the original Ridge Racer tracks, like this one in particular, Speed Nation. It plays during the replays.
Okay.
But when your race starts before the countdown ends, you can hit left and right to choose which song you want to play during the race, and you can actually pick this song during the race. So you can play it during the race, or you can play it, it automatically plays during the replays, which is kind of cool. Keith Aram, he is a big name, actually, nowadays in video games. I first found out about him, I had a Columbia Records subscription way back in the day. And,
It's okay. I won't knock you, I had BMG.
It was, my brother and I were both huge into music, so we just kind of shared a Columbia account.
You couldn't beat the deals.
And,
I mean, it was like
between
30,
the two of us,
30 cents for 30 CDs.
right?
Or
But between the two of us, we ordered to our heart's content and got tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah.
And the little booklet. There was no real internet back then. This was the mid '90s, so I was a really big industrial fan, like Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and all that. So they had this one page on this band called Contagion. They kind of, likened them to Nine Inch Nails, same kind of sound or whatever. So I was like, screw it, I've got 12 CDs coming my way. It was one of the ones I picked, and I fell in love with it. And the name of the album was Contaminant PCB, and it was Keith Aram's band. It was like a one-man project that he did. So, I kind of really enjoyed it and kind of started following up on him, and then realized he was a video game composer too. So he did like Demolition Man back in the day, and he did Thrill Kill, which never ended up coming out.
Right.
And I think I've talked about this before, but he did all the music for the Thrill Kill soundtrack, and when Virgin bought them and the game got canned, he took those songs and kind of fleshed them out with lyrics and stuff and released another album under the Contagion band name. So he did that, and then nowadays he runs PCB Productions. So he's done music and voice talent for film and video for like Sleeping Dogs, Call of Duty Black Ops, the Spider-Man game that came out on the 360, Titanfall, like tons and tons of huge AAA games. Not only helps out with soundtrack and sound design and sound effects, but basically anything audio. So there's this huge production outfit that, he just started off like as a one-man industrial band doing stuff. Really, really cool.
So it kind of came out of the old and into the new.
Yeah. And this track Speed Nation that we played is kind of neat because it shows a little bit of his like chuggy guitars that he had along with dance beats from his industrial stuff, but it left enough of the original Rotterdam Nation track in there to kind of like make it a remix, but he had his own spin on it. So it was a lot of fun, and for a sequenced song, that guitar solo in there, again, is just similar to like, Rakuga Kids, where you can string all these guitar samples together and kind of make cool guitar solos out of them. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So you didn't have too much experience with Ridge Racer on the 64, right?
Nah, not really. I'll be honest. Like I said, I just wasn't a racing guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the only racing games I really liked back then, I liked Extreme G. I like the, it's funny, I liked a lot of the arcade racers, but I never played F-Zero X back in the day. So, I don't know, I just, those type of games. I also really liked Mario Kart. I was a big fan of Mario Kart.
Yeah.
That era, I just wasn't big into racers. I liked really, really arcadey racers, or things like Twisted Metal, or like Vigilante 8, because we didn't get Twisted Metal on the N64.
Right.
So I pretty much, it was like I had to play the poor man's version, which was Vigilante 8, which
Still,
is
it's not a bad
still
game.
a fun game, but definitely like nowhere near as good as Twisted Metal.
Right.
Yeah. So that was my experience with the racing games. I did play Ridge Racer 64 years and years and years later, and I was just like, meh, it's a arcadey racer type thing.
I mean, if you've played one Ridge Racer,
Yeah.
you've played them all up
Pretty
until
much.
the most recent ones.
I don't
Except
like-
for freaking Ridge Racer Unbounded, which is an abomination to the whole line. It's awful.
I'm not a big fan of when games really highly publicize like what type of cars are driven. Aside from like the new Mario Kart game, which they were kind of like, hey, let's do this weird deal with Mercedes. But with like Beetle Adventure Racing, which is our next track, that was the one exception I would say where I was like, all right, okay, so they're upfront about it. They're not like, hey, let's make a car racing game and then be like, all of a sudden, oh, there's real cars and let's throw the licenses in your face.
Yeah.
They were upfront and honest about it, and they were like, hey, guess what? These are VW Beetles. Like,
And it was when the new Beetle was just coming out.
Right,
So it was a cool little promotional...
and everybody had that car back then, too.
Yeah. And so Beetle Adventure Racing, I'm glad that I turned you on to it, because it is my favorite N64 game.
It is a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun playing it. It's a very basic game, but it had a lot of depth to it at the same time. So, like, it was very easy to pick up and play.
The mechanics are very simple.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very easy to pick up and play.
The star of the game is the levels.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you've played like San Francisco Rush or any of those kind of games, you drive around a city and then there's shortcuts you can take. But this game takes shortcuts to a whole other level.
Yeah.
There are tons of them, and they will go in areas of the game that are completely different than like what the regular racing stage is.
And I like how they're hidden. Like, it's the sort of thing where you won't know that it's hidden. Like, you were telling me about one of the secrets where if you jump over the bridge
At a certain angle,
that you'll be able to go down this area, and there's like a UFO down there. And I was like, how in the world did you find that, Ed? And you were like, oh no, I just played this game a lot.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what's
It's an
really
exploration.
cool about these types of games is back in the day, they used to hide little things like that. Like, I remember playing Chocobo Racing, and they would hide like all these insane shortcuts that would get you either way ahead of the competition or would totally screw you over because it was too narrow.
Yeah.
And so I found a lot of that in Beetle Adventure Racing, which I really liked. That, like you and I were going pretty much neck and neck, and you were taking shortcuts that I didn't know about, but I would still come out and not be too far behind. So I really like that about the game.
Yeah, the cool thing, I mean, a lot of people don't like what they call rubber banding in multiplayer racing games, which means that when you're behind, you go just a couple miles per hour faster than the person in front of you. Kind of keeps the game a little more even.
Right.
But because the game, this particular game, a lot of the levels are so open that you're going at full speed. A lot of times if you make one screw up, you're never going to catch up to the other person unless they have this kind of rubber band mechanic.
It's your own
It does make it
fault.
kind of fun. There's a neck and neck aspect to the multiplayer game, which makes it cool. And it's not like it's a real like competitive simulation game.
It's just a fun game.
arcade racer.
Exactly.
And I really recommend, if you've got an N64, you've never played this game, definitely give it a try. Because
Like $5, you can get a
there's so
copy
many
with
cool
cat
different
pee and
levels.
crayon all over it. It'll be great. You'll love it.
But all the levels are completely different themes, and they're all really well done. There's like a Jurassic Park level, and a Egyptian level, and like a city level that's like kind of like got a Vegas aspect to it. Totally fun. The music is from Phil Western, Scott Blackwood, and Brendan Tennant. Phil Western was the lead composer on this soundtrack. And he's actually more of an industrial guy, even though this soundtrack is kind of like, how would you describe this?
I guess I would say it's kind of like chill techno.
Yeah.
Or like chill trance.
Like early Chemical Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like laid back, backbeat music. Like really, like not drum and bass, but just you throw it on in the background. Like the music, it fits really well when you're driving because most of the sounds that you're hearing are engine noises, like driving noises. So they do a good job about leaving the music so it's not over blaring, but it's not too quiet that you can't hear it. So I think they do a good job of balance.
And they did a good job with the music. I think that even though there's the music is pretty simple and there's not a lot of different instruments, it's just a fun bass groove and some cool like violin samples, and it just works really well. Phil Western actually worked with like Skinny Puppy and Nine Inch Nails and a whole bunch of really aggressive industrial bands, but he also worked with Bryan Adams. so
a lot of production.
He did a lot of production and had his own band called Download with one of the members of Skinny Puppy, which was like an experimental noise band.
Okay.
So he really knows his way around electronics and how to get the most out of like obsolete sound equipment and stuff like that. So he did a lot of that with this game. Scott Blackwood was mostly audio production. The only music composition credit he has is for this game. Otherwise, he's worked mostly on like the 007 games that EA put out and the Need for Speed games. And then Brendan Tennant, again, only did really music composition for this one, but did mostly audio software engineering for other EA games like Spy Hunter, Indie Racing, and stuff like that. So let's get into the music. This is the track from Mount Mayhem, which is a kind of a wintry ski-themed level.
Right.
Enjoy it.
Welcome back. That was our final track of our wonderful little N64 Spotlight episode.
See, now that's the music I'd more expect to come from Phil Western.
Yeah?
Very industrial,
Okay.
machine-like music, but it was not.
It was not. This was a track off of Mischief Maker's soundtrack, and this game came out in 1997, and that track was called Volcanic.
Yes, it was also called UK Troublemakers in Japan.
All right then.
And it's developed by Treasure.
Yes, it is. This was one of the few Treasure developed games, and I think this was a huge shift for Treasure because Treasure was ex-Konami. Konami had mainly worked with NES, Super NES, was very much adapted to the Nintendo systems. And Treasure was like, we're gonna go do our own thing with Sega. Jumped over to Sega, started making some amazing games for Sega, and kind of shifted back towards Nintendo.
Yeah.
With this release, and so
And Bangayo, too.
yeah,
originally came out in
Bangayo,
64.
Mischief Makers, and then later on Sin and Punishment. So really interesting that they decided that the N64 was the better of the two.
Maybe Iwata was like, we will give you so much money to come make stuff.
It was
because...
well, it would have been Yamauchi.
Oh, what? Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't know when the
Yamauchi-
changeover took place.
Yeah, the changeover for Iwata took place during, I think, late GameCube era.
That's right. It was relatively recent.
Yeah,
Okay.
or really early Wii, late GameCube
It just feels
era.
like he's always been
I know.
the face of Nintendo.
I know, but it was actually Yamauchi
Yeah.
who was running Nintendo at that point, and Nintendo and most of the developers, the third-party developers, did not have a good relationship at that point because, especially when Square left, because they were like, well, we're not gonna make cartridge-based games. I mean, they were at first, but as soon as he was like, we don't need you, they were like, all right, let's go bring Final Fantasy VII, one of the biggest games and most important releases of all time, over to the PlayStation. Peace out, see you later. So Treasure kind of did the opposite, and they were like, let's give Nintendo a chance. And they made this great little game, which is
Shake, shake.
Shake Shake, 2D, totally on 2D, has this little girl that you play as, a teenage girl. I don't even know how old she is.
She's a cyborg.
Yeah, she's a cyborg girl named Marina. And so basically the game starts off and you are, watching this little cutscene with this older guy who's like the professor. And he basically gets kidnapped by this big bad guy. He's a bad guy.
He's not the good guy.
He's not the good guy.
bad
He's a bad guy. And so Mischief Makers just kind of was like this game that came out of nowhere that nobody played. And I gotta say, it has a really kind of a difficult learning curve to play. I mean, I was controlling this game and I had never played it, and I knew about the shake thing, so I was trying to do the shake thing, and I just couldn't get a handle on it at first. And I was trying to go into these areas where I saw these gems, and normally when you're playing a platformer type game, you're like, I need to collect things. That's like your goal, that's like your mission. And so this game kind of teaches you about the story and the gameplay all at once as you're going through the intro stages. And there's a lot of stages throughout the whole entire game, so it's not like it's a short title. But it gets more and more deep as you go throughout the game. This track in particular, as you said, is very industrial sounding. It's got this pleasant mix of Japanese, kind of like the Japanese like high-pitched flute that comes in like in the middle with this really high pitched, like almost like vocal
like
synth.
a tea kettle
Yeah.
flying over.
Yeah, seriously.
But then it kind of warbles at the end like it's a high operatic voice.
Right.
It's kind of a neat cross between the two instruments.
And it's got these like amazing drums that just like it's militant, but it's also very like something's being built. So you've got this like shooting noise. It's like shoo. It's like really cool and clean and crisp sounding. So this is one of the cleaner tracks that I've heard on the N64 that has this really cool mix of old school and new school kind of mixed together and is symphonic all at once too. So it really is a very unique track if you listen to it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The Treasure's in-house composer, I guess you can call him that.
Yeah.
Norio Hanzawa,
Hanzawa-san, yeah.
also known as Non, composed the soundtrack for this game.
Yeah.
And he started off with Konami way back with roller games. So that's what,
Yeah.
87, 88 that game came
That
out?
was that Double Dragon roller skate clone, right?
Yeah.
It was like you were Double Dragon on roller skates.
Basically, kind of
It's
similar
a fun
to that.
game. I really like that game.
Yeah,
Had
and
a
then-
great soundtrack too.
He also composed Dynamite Heady,
Okay.
Bucky O'Hare, tons and tons of good stuff.
Yeah.
And then once he ended up with Treasure, it was like almost every Treasure game that came out, he composed for.
Yeah.
So, Alien Soldier, Guardian Heroes, Gunstar Heroes, Mischief Makers, obviously, Gunstar Superheroes. So he did all the Gunstar Heroes games. The Sylphid sequels, not the original Sylphid, but Sylphid the Lost Planet. Stretch Panic. I did music for the Simpsons arcade game.
That's
which is
right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That had a really weird sound.
Well, that was Konami too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he also did the soundtrack for Sin and Punishment and Sin and Punishment Star Successor.
That's right. The one that came out on the Wii that nobody
Yeah.
played.
I know.
I got it for $5.
I did too. They
Yeah.
marked it down to Best Buy.
Yeah.
So I bought a copy and it's
Yeah.
still sealed. I'm like, it's never going to be worth anything.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that game and I'm
Yeah.
surprised that it did so poorly.
I don't know.
And I think that's why a lot of these titles nowadays, people shy away from Nintendo because games like that don't sell very well, which really sucks.
Which is crazy because everyone's like, oh, Nintendo's kiddie, and then they release a mature game
And
or a
nobody buys
teen-rated
it.
game and nobody buys it. So it's kind of nice to go back to an era where everything was still kind of in place. You had the Japanese developers, you had the Western developers, and everybody was kind of harmonizing to make great games or try to make great
Yeah.
games for a system like the N64.
And they were all like, middle of what we would consider now to be a middle of the road. Not quite indie, but not quite.
Right.
Like Choice Provisions or guide like the Bit Trip series, where it's like it's a little too big to be indie.
Right.
But definitely not like Electronic Arts, Ubisoft
Yeah.
big. You don't see too much of that nowadays, but back in those days, that was the majority of the games because there weren't really any indie titles. There were like homebrew stuff that for the PC that you can get, like
Right.
those kind of shareware things.
Yeah.
But it was a handful here and there per year.
There was basically, if you wanted to make a game for N64 or PlayStation 1 or Saturn, you had to be a big developer
Yeah.
with
Just for
multi-million dollars.
licensing abilities, yeah.
And unfortunately, that kind of saw the beginning of the end too for these multi-million-dollar ginormous companies like what happened with Daikatana, which released on N64 as well. This huge game that has this huge, crazy budget and just released and flopped because the game just wasn't good.
Right.
So it's kind of that era where you need to prove yourself, and if you didn't, your development team is done. And so this is that kind of, a lot of developers cut their teeth, especially Western developers cut their teeth on a lot of those types of games.
It's true.
During
It's
this
true.
era, yeah.
Well, Treasure's still kicking around, fortunately.
Yes, true story.
But hopefully they will keep on making awesome games without needing to go completely independent or
I hope so.
silly AAA stuff.
Well, we
Buy
gotta
your season pass for Super Duper Gunstar Heroes today.
You know what? I'd rather give them my money than give, EA my money.
Yeah, me too.
As far as that sort
Absolutely.
of stuff goes. I mean, But that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother podcast. I'm just kind of still basking in the glory that is the N64. There were so many other tracks I wanted to pick from.
I know. True.
I totally could have just played a whole Perfect Dark episode, and I would have been fine with that. But that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would have hated that.
Yeah.
You would have been like, can we get on with this?
No, but there are many other good titles out there with excellent music, like Ogre Battle 64.
Yes.
The list kind of goes on, and we'll definitely pepper more N64 soundtracks in throughout our future podcasts.
Podcast.
Speaking of which, finally, my brother will be on next show. He has promised me that he will be on next show.
Yay!
So we've tried to get him on for the last 2 episodes, and so this will be, hopefully, we've had his picks. He sent us a list of songs that he wants to play, and they're all totally awesome. But until then, you can join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/PixelTunes Radio. That is the place to be, to hang out with us. Give us some feedback on our podcast. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Do you want more talking about balls? Do you want more talking about music? Let us know. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at PixelTunes Radio. We are pretty active there. And you can also subscribe to Mike's YouTube channel. Why don't you talk about that?
Right. You can listen to the podcast in YouTube format by going to youtube.com/dongled, or just type in PixelTunes Radio on YouTube. PixelTunes is one word, and then radio is the second. You'll probably find us.
Well, you can also catch us on Stitcher.
Yeah, you can.
That's a good streaming option. It's not
or
as
iTunes.
High. Yes. Stitcher isn't as high of a bit rate, so the sound quality is a little bit lower than what I normally put out, but I do realize we have a high bit rate podcast, so the downloads are pretty big.
That's
so
true.
It does help you if you're in an area with not a lot of service and you can't wait to listen to our shows. You can grab us on Stitcher. And
so if you like PixelTunes Radio and you want to do us a favor, other than, if we had like some kind of cool donation page, that'd be cool. But we don't have that. So instead what we have is a way to like our stuff and give us a small little review if you like the channel, you like the show. Let us know what you think, and let us know how we can improve too. That's a great way to let us know what you didn't like, what you did like. You could also do that in the Facebook page. Don't go to the page itself. Go to facebook.com/groups/PixelTunes Radio. That is, as Ed said, the place to be. So that's it. That's all I got. I'm going to go play some N64.
I'm going to go, slog through the mud and the fog.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And play some Conker?
Play some Conker.
Or some Jet Force Gemini?
I might do Conker.
Yeah?
I haven't played that in a long time.
It's a really good game.
It is.
I think if I could play one N64 game right now, it'd be either Jet Force Gemini or Winback.
Oh, Winback is good.
Isn't Winback good?
Winback is great.
Nobody talks about Winback. That's a fun game.
That was the first kind of duck and cover shooter out there.
Yeah, no, that definitely predated Gears of War by like years.
Well, yeah, of course. But that's where Gears of War really took their gameplay mechanic from.
Right. But that was a fun game. It was very much kind of like Time Crisis meets Metal Gear.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
that works.
It was cool.
And Hybrid Heaven, that was a fun one too.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I had Hybrid Heaven. I still have it. It's a cool game.
It's a little stiff, but had some decent gameplay elements in it.
Yeah. It had some unique ideas, definitely different, and it, pretty high quality voiceover work too.
All right, guys, join us online. Talk about N64 with us. We want to hear what your favorite games are. We will see you in 2 weeks with a really cool selection of tracks from my brother. We will see you then. Peace out.
Bye.